The President of the United States and the First Lady of the United States both test positive for the COVID-19 novel coronavirus. On this episode of Bill Whittle Now, we unpack what that portends for the future of the campaign and the country. I'm Scott Ott with Bill Whittle. And Bill, this news broke from the president's own Twitter account at about 1 o'clock on the morning that we record this on Friday. And there has been a rolling series of revelations even in the last few hours. And I'm sure by the time this video goes live, there'll be even more. And so I want to, if possible, keep this on a broader scope of the consequences or the implications of a president of the United States testing positive for a disease which has killed at this point some 209,000 people, but which many millions more have tested positive for and escaped, sometimes asymptomatically, sometimes with symptoms that went away. Bill, first of all, right now, as we record this, the media is reporting that the White House says the president is displaying mild symptoms, that the First Lady is asymptomatic at the moment, but that could change as time goes by. What is the effect, and I'm talking more psychologically here, what is the effect on the country, on the markets? What do you think the impact of this will be?
I got the news late last night, too, and I haven't had a chance to check anything this morning. We're recording this pretty early on Friday morning. So the first thing I realized when I heard the news is that sometime during the night, by this morning, by right now, there are uncounted numbers of tweets from people saying, good, I hope he dies. People who thought that he's minimized this disease, people who thought that he was responsible for the disease, this ongoing drumbeat from the part of the media, from the man who shut down travel to China very early and who was accused of racist for it. I can only imagine there's an awful lot of just plain nastiness and stuff like that out there. So the people who think that this is the end of the world are rejoicing. Many of them, I hate to say it, but it's true, and there's no other word for it. They're praying that he's going to die from this. That's where we've gotten.
Now, Bill, let me add to that thought the fact that both his rival in the presidential race, Joe Biden, and Dr. Jill Biden, his wife, as well as Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House, both Democrats, are both saying that they are praying for the president and the First Lady and for their health, as well as for Hope Hicks, a close advisor to the president who also tested positive and was possibly the vector through which the presidential family got this. And so it's not all great, we hope he dies. There are people out there who oppose him politically, who are praying for him.
Well, let me just say this, and this is very, very, very important. I was unaware of that. I knew that they would never come out and say that. But for Pelosi and Biden and so on to make a statement like that restores a very significant amount of hope for this country in my mind. I did not expect them to come out and say, I hope he dies, but I didn't expect them to be that gracious, and that is a pleasant surprise. So now on to the actual physical consequences of this. The logic of it is he's either going to recover from it or he's not. One of the things that this may do is force attention on the fact that in the last month, the Center for Disease Control, this isn't Fox News and it's not BillWhittle.com, this is the CDC, published a set of most recent statistics for the mortality rate for COVID-19, and then a couple days ago they did it again. And the mortality rate for people in Donald Trump's age group is something, I think, on the order of less than, it is certainly less than the flu. The mortality rate for people in their, anywhere from, birth to 50s is something like 99.993%.
You mean the survival rate?
I'm sorry, yes. And those are just of people that tested positive. And only a small number of the population ever test positive because not everybody gets the disease. Very few of them do, actually. So Donald Trump's chances of survival are excellent. He is in extremely robust health. He remains just a fireball of uncontrollable energy. And I personally have very little doubt that he's going to pull through this with some symptoms, but I don't suspect that this is going to be too much of a problem for him.
And of course, I'm not asking you to project his physical health in the course of it, but kind of what this does psychologically. I just listened to an NPR newscast moments ago, And they kept interrupting the newscast by giving us moment by moment, like every 30 seconds, they gave us what the Dow was doing. And at that time, I think the Dow was down 132 points. But there is this sense that the president's health affects the psychic health of the country.
That he's either going to live or die, and that any conclusions we draw from that are going to come from that foundation. And I'm trying to establish that the chance of him living is far greater than the chance of him dying. So if he survives this, and it seems likely that he will, then that will be on some level a victory for the people who say that this disease is not as deadly as people have said it would be. If he does die from it, it will be a confirmation from the people who say it is more deadly than it appears to be. So what happens to Donald Trump and Donald Trump's health? He will become the highest profile COVID-19 case in the country, obviously. And by watching the progress of what happens to Donald Trump and his health over the course of the next 2 weeks, people will have their biases confirmed, or they won't be. But it is going to be a litmus test for the division in the country as to the seriousness of this disease. He is going to become the litmus test for whether this disease is as deadly as health officials have made it out to be.
But in a sense, he's not, Bill, because you just said why he's not. Because of the confirmation bias factor in this, people will see in what happens whatever it is they already believed.
Well, if people believe that COVID-19 is a fatal disease and basically kills anybody who's not wearing a mask or sanitizing everything, and he rolls through it with the sniffles, that's going to cause some cognitive dissonance. So his health will be, it's an odd and strange and not pleasant thing. But honestly, it seems to me at this point, Donald Trump's experience with COVID-19 is going to be the national experience with COVID-19. That's good. He's going to be the one single person who's tested positive for this. He and the First Lady will be the only people that everybody will be looking at the same time, and like it or not, that's what's going to happen. The country is in large part going to base their decision on the severity of this lockdown, based on how well or how poorly Donald Trump comes through this disease.
You see a political ad coming that says he beat Hillary Clinton, he beat the impeachment charges, he beat the Democrats over and over again in Congress, and now he's beaten the Wuhan flu.
Well, I don't see that so much as an ad, Scott. I see that the most damage that you can do to the Fauci case for shutting down the country for 2 years, or the we did a segment on de Blasio with Right Angle saying we're going to keep, de Blasio said he's going to keep New York shut down until there are no new cases, zero. And so if Donald Trump basically continues his campaign appearances and is got a little bit of a cough or a cold and recovers, that is going to be evidence for him against Joe Biden's claims that he would have shut down the country, done it earlier, and keep it shut down. That's what he said during the first debate. So since we live in a world where everything is politicized, we can't just wish for the health of the president anymore, although I'm enormously gratified that those top-level Democrat leaders did that. It's going to be a referendum. And rightfully so. I mean, Donald Trump is an older guy, but he's also in very good health. He doesn't seem to have any comorbidities. So on some level, he's kind of a lab rat. And
actually, the suggestion is that he does have comorbidities in addition to the obesity, which is just physically obvious. There have been some in the media that suggested we're not getting the full picture. The president's doctor gives such rosy pictures of his health that it's really hard to tell if he has any other conditions. He did have a visit to Walter Reed Hospital last year, which was somewhat secretive, and really we never found out why he was there. But that aside, Bill, the New York Times quotes, as usual, unnamed sources, but they say they were both Democrats and people who are advisors to the president, saying that this will cause a particularly harsh judgment from the voters on November 3rd, and as they're voting right now, actually. Do you think voters will actually take this and weigh it in the balance?
This is one of the main arguments among the many arguments that there are for early voting, late voting, all of it. This is, of all of the reasons to hate and to despise this idea that you can vote on who's going to be president 2 months before the elections, just as the debates are beginning, just as the positions are starting to clarify, that alone should invalidate the idea of early voting. But you can say, I think just the opposite, frankly. I think if Donald Trump maintains his aggressive schedule, I think it's going to show people that no, it is what
the White House has already acknowledged that he
is.
Can't do that, Bill. I mean, he's got to quarantine, he's got to isolate, so he'll be isolating in the White House. Now, he may be able to, although I didn't read anything about this, but just naturally you assume that he could do some video meetings, closed circuit stuff, assuming he's in good health and has a good speaking voice to be able to do that. But the big story, as far as the campaign goes, is what do you do 36 days from the election when suddenly you can't leave the White House?
That is a serious concern. And now it will be up to Donald Trump to show Joe Biden what doing political messaging from quarantine really looks like. I think right now, Scott, the single great question that I have is, at what point can Donald Trump be proven to be medically recovered and to the degree that he's no longer infectious? Now, I'm not even concerned about the immunity, because they are certainly, I certainly imagine they're going to try to cancel one of the debates over this, at least. That's a significant problem for Donald Trump, I think. And taking him out of the campaign for how long is another significant problem. He will certainly, if our previous experience has been any guide whatsoever, it looks like we're talking about the high end of 2 weeks from the onset of symptoms to either recovering or not. And so that does mean there will be time for him to make appearances before the election happens, but he will lose at least 10 days, I would imagine, of critical time. And that's going to hurt. But again, I think since so much of this election is a referendum on COVID-19, it is going to be either particularly bad news for Republicans or good news, depending on how he deals with it. I think the sight of a healthy Donald Trump who went into quarantine to stop infections, had a couple bad days with cough or something, a little whatever. If he's back out there vigorously after contracting COVID-19, that will be a referendum on whether or not the country should have been locked down to the degree that it was. That's going to be the only thing that people are going to see.
Let's take the worst case scenario now, and I do this with trepidation and caution, even bringing up the subject, because nobody wants to think about this, but some people have died. Many people have died as a result of this virus. The president may come to a point, if he is symptomatic and increasingly symptomatic, where he has to do what previous presidents did when they were simply going to be under anesthesia, which is essentially transfer authority to the vice president. So that 25th Amendment kind of concept, I want you to deal with that and in the context not only of a temporary transition of power to the vice president, but what happens should the worst come to pass and the president passes away before the election? How do you see the country coping with that?
With all of the caveats and so on about this being a hypothetical and so on and so on, it is an interesting situation, isn't it? If Donald Trump were to succumb to the disease, then I don't see any other alternative than Mike Pence being the nominee for president of the United States. A new vice president would be appointed, however these things are done, maybe through the president or whatever. If he becomes incapacitated before a candidate is done, Mike Pence will select the vice presidential candidate because he's currently the vice president. And then it will be an election between Joe Biden and Mike Pence. If that were to happen, strangely enough, I think that would probably be more in the favor of Republicans than it would be for Democrats. And the reason I say that is because so much of the reason that people, there are many people who are disgusted and distressed by what they see in the Democratic Party and with all the rioting in the streets and so on. But their personal antipathy towards Donald Trump is so enormous that they can't get past that. If the president were to pass away from this disease, or if he'd been hit by a car, then you'd be left with Mike Pence. Now, Mike Pence doesn't fire up the base the way that Donald Trump does, obviously, but I can't think of a single Republican who was ready to, and enthusiastic to vote for Donald Trump, who would not be as enthusiastic to vote for Mike Pence. And I can think of an awful lot of people, an awful lot of people who would suddenly look at the Republican candidate with a much different perspective than they do looking at Donald Trump.
In a sense, he's got the laudable policy associations of the president for people who like some of the things he's done, but without the personality peccadillos that can be off-putting.
Mike Pence on his own could not ever have been president of the United States, especially in this environment. And of all the people that have come in and out of Donald Trump's cabinet and his close advisors over the course of the last 4 years, Pence has been an absolute rock, just an absolute pillar of stability. If the worst were to happen, and we're just dealing with speculation, but that's why we're here. If the worst were to happen, I think that every single person that supported Donald Trump would go out there and vote for Mike Pence. And I think that Mike Pence, because of his much different demeanor, his much greater sense of discipline, and just frankly his more thoughtfulness and so on, I think it would actually attract a lot of people who were on the fence and just simply either couldn't vote for Donald Trump or decided not to vote for anybody. So I think that would be probably the case. I think I hate to say it, but I think that probably Pence might do better than Donald Trump would do, only because I want to be crystal clear on this, because Donald Trump has lit up the half of the country that feels like a bunch of undereducated, over-morally righteous, left-leaning communists have taken over the country. Donald Trump was the person who came to the rescue in that case. He's the one who basically said, no, let's make America great again. Mike Pence never could have done that on his own. But if the president were to succumb to this disease or any other incident, I think that Mike Pence would get all of the benefits of being Donald Trump's vice president. And I don't think, and I think he would also gain a number of people, a number of the never Trumpers, for example, who look at his conservative record and look at his character and his demeanor and suddenly say, oh, great, I can actually get behind this guy.
The members of BillWhittle.com have made this program possible, and they, among many millions of Americans, are also praying for the health and safety and rapid recovery of the President of the United States, the First Lady, Hope Hicks, and others who may turn out to have tested positive as well. And our prayers join them. We thank you for watching this. For Bill Whittle, I'm Scott Ott.